All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog 2025, number 168. And today, I'm actually filming this the same day as I filmed the previous daily vlog, mostly because this is the video I intended to film. And then we found out about Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford, and I had to make a video about that. So, today, we're going to be talking about what makes a good streaming tabletop RPG. Now, if anyone is wondering what I mean by that, when I say a streaming tabletop RPG, what I mean is something that, as a viewer, is going to be the easiest to get into and the best chance of being entertaining for the audience. And why does that matter? Well, I see a lot, like, one of the kind of theoretical arguments that I have seen specifically talking about Critical Role is, well, what if Critical Role had stuck with Pathfinder instead of switching over to 5th edition? Then Pathfinder would be the number one tabletop RPG on the market. And to be blunt, no, it wouldn't. What would have happened is Critical Role wouldn't exist now. What do you mean by that? The reason that Critical Role is as big as it is now is they did just about everything you could do right from the beginning. First of all, they already had a very dedicated fan base before their first video aired. How could that be? Well, because they were broadcasting on Geek and Sundry, which had already existed for like 3 years at that point, 2 or 3 years. And the Geek and Sundry fan base was not only massive, but they were incredibly supportive. I used to talk about how the Geek and Sundry forums, which don't exist anymore, but used to be a thing, were the nicest place on the internet. And the reason that I said that was because they were. You could show up on the forums, post anything you wanted, and you would have somebody there that would try to interact and make you feel welcome. Does that mean every single post, automatically blew up? No. It still worked like every other forum, which is popularity based. But everyone there was just so incredibly supportive, even during the Geek and Sundry vlogger search. You had hundreds, if not thousands, of people competing with each other to try and become one of these Geek and Sundry vloggers, and every single one of us, with a few rare exceptions, were on the forums hyping up the other creators and talking about the people that we liked the most, other than us, obviously. Like, it was an amazing thing. So, when Critical Role started, they already had an incredibly supportive fan base. Second of all, they went the extra mile to take anyone new that showed up, and as the fan base was exploding, they went the extra mile to keep people feeling connected to them. They would do dance-off streams and Critmas and all this other stuff where they really connected with their fan base. In addition, they picked a very streamable tabletop RPG. What I mean by that is Dungeons and Dragons in and of itself is remarkably easy to follow. Even if you are not super familiar with it, it's really, really easy to follow. There aren't a lot of kind of floating modifiers or rules that just kind of pop up randomly. Specifically 5th edition, the only thing you really need to understand when things start getting complicated is the advantage-disadvantage system. So if I have never opened a TTRPG book in my life and I sit down to watch Critical Role, I can follow the story because they're good storytellers. And then when the mechanics start getting into play, all I need to know is bigger number is good. So they say how much they rolled, and then Matt says whether or not they're good or not. And other things start to fall into place, like bad guys have hit points, and so bigger numbers the players roll, the worse the bad guys do. And that's really as complicated as watching Critical Role really gets, or watching a 5th edition D&D game really gets. Is 5th edition super simplistic? No, but a lot of the complexity starts to kind of melt away when you're just observing it. When you're playing it, there's a lot more complexity about using your action economy correctly and stuff like that. But when you're watching it, again, understanding the action economy. You have an action, a bonus action, and a reaction. Really simple, really easy to understand what's going on. Whereas something like Pathfinder is massively complex. It is an incredibly complex game, and 2nd edition just made it more so. So for a casual observer, trying to watch Pathfinder would have gotten very confusing very quickly, especially when you start adding in all the floating modifiers like shooting in to melee, or the various dual wielding bonuses and things like that. Like all of that stuff would get, or penalties. You don't get bonuses or dual wielding. You don't get bonuses or anything in Pathfinder. It's all punishment. And then the other thing that's really helpful with D&D in general is D&D was already popular. So the idea of having to teach new players or new audience members how to play D&D was really not that difficult. Not only are most people that play tabletop RPGs, which was a large portion of their target audience, not only were most of them already familiar with how Dungeons and Dragons works just in general, but there are so many resources that exist on the internet, even when Critical Role started, to teach you how to play Dungeons and Dragons, that the barrier to entry for people to be able to figure it out was going to be very low. And again, explaining how to play D&D 5th edition is really simple. Pathfinder just isn't. It's just significantly more complicated. So it got me thinking, what makes a good streamable RPG? And I think there's just a few things that you really need to have an RPG that is going to stream well. The first thing, it has to be relatively easy to understand. Does that mean it needs to be the most basic, simple thing in the world? No, but it needs to be something that a casual observer can just sit down with no knowledge of it and be able to at least basically follow what's going on, maybe ask a few questions in chat to clarify some more of the complex aspects of it. And the easier it is for a new player to just sit down and observe it, the easier it's going to be to not only get an audience, but to get new people as the campaign goes on. Because that's another thing that tends to be really rough for streaming full tabletop campaigns, is the longer your campaign goes on, the less new viewers you are going to get, and the less repeat viewers you're going to get. Anything that goes on for a long time loses viewers as it goes. There's a really interesting study that came out a few years ago. I can't remember specifically when. But they looked at the difference for specifically streaming TV shows between shows that put up the entire series all at once versus shows that put it up weekly and in pieces and things like that. What they were able to find is shows that put their episode count up all at once actually had larger a larger number of people that actually made it to the final episode, whereas doing it once a week more kind of traditionally saw a significantly faster drop off in viewers. So anything that requires you to come back multiple times results in a loss of viewers. Television has known this for a while. That's why serialized TV shows, where basically there wasn't a huge overarching plot, or it was minor enough that you could watch the episodes in any order and not really feel like you're missing anything, like sitcoms, became really, really popular in the 90s and the 2000s because they saw less of a drop in viewership over the lifetime, or over the season. Even the most popular TV show at the time saw a loss of viewers week over week. And that just has to do with the fact that some weeks you're not going to, especially for something that's quote unquote live, like Critical Role, where you have to watch it when they're streaming it, unless you want to wait for an extra few days to watch it on YouTube. You have to set aside the time, and there may be something that stops you. And the more more of an overarching plot there is, the less of a chance that people are going to be able to catch up and go to it. So one of those barriers is how difficult it's going to be to just understand what's going on. So having a system that people can understand relatively easily is essential for a good streamable RPG. Now, there's a number of different ways to make it easier for new audience members to be able to follow what's going on. One of the things that I do constantly is I teach the RPG as I am running it. Sorry, I had something in my mouth of that. I teach the RPG as I am running it. So whenever players do something for the first time, I will explain the mechanics and everything in a very simple to understand way, because that's what I do. I'm a trainer. And that makes it significantly easier for people to be able to watch, because they don't have to ask any questions or anything. I explain it right there. Another way to get around that is to do a Critical Role which is choose a game that people already know, or there are tons and tons of resources out there that make it easier to understand what's going on. Can you watch a TTRPG without understanding what's going on? Technically, yes, but it doesn't do well. It was actually one of the bits of advice that I gave to Zach Eubank when Hyperforce was going. When Hyperforce first started, it had a bit of trouble getting its audience, if I remember correctly. Again, feel free, anyone that was around Hyper RPG when that was happening, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. It wasn't an unpopular show by any measure whatsoever, but it wasn't really building momentum. And I don't remember if... I don't think Zach reached out to me. I think I reached out to him and just said, hey, by the way, here's some stuff that I've noticed after watching Hyperforce. And one of the things that I mentioned to him is, you guys are using a system that nobody understands. The players themselves don't seem to understand it super well, and the audience doesn't understand it at all, because you guys made up the system. Thank you, phone. You guys made up this system. Like, Malika designed the system from scratch. And they kind of explained it once before, I think, like the first episode, but they hadn't said anything since then. And so watching it, a lot of times it really felt like the players were rolling dice and then just saying made up numbers, and then things would happen. And it was really difficult to follow. And so I mentioned to Zach, I said, hey, could you guys have, like, you guys have a commercial break every single time in this, and you have like pre-roll ad kind of things. They weren't actually ads. I mean, they were, but they weren't like from Twitch or something. They would advertise their own stuff. And so I said, make like a really quick, like couple minute long thing of, hey, this is how our Power Rangers RPG works. When you, the players do this and they can do this, and just something that was super simple, super easy to follow, and was very short, so that somebody coming for the first time could just watch this thing and go, oh, now I understand how this works. And they started doing that. Now, Zach never told me if that was actually a net gain or not. And there was a lot of other things that they started doing after the show started that also probably increase their viewership as well. They started getting more guest stars that were former Power Rangers and things like that. So I don't think it's possible in any way, shape, or form to specifically state that my suggestion was what helped the show kick a catch off. But I don't think it hurt it in any way. And now for Daggerheart, Critical Role is actually doing the exact same thing. If you watch Daggerheart live on the Twitch channel, they have pre-roll ads that Critical Role makes, and one of them is just like a 2-minute little intro to, hey, this is how Daggerheart works. And they just explain the duality dice. They just explain the very basic stuff that you need to be able to understand how things are working and be able to get excited for it. Again, is it possible that they came up with that on their own? Very, very likely. However, I like to think, because I'm incredibly narcissistic and full of myself, that they at one point had spoken to Zach, and Zach had mentioned, oh, this was really essential for Hyperforce getting as popular as it was. I don't think that actually happened, but in my brain, I like to pretend that's what actually happened. And so for a streamable RPG, if you're going to be doing something like that, having a pre-roll or a mid-roll thing that you make that you can play that just goes, by the way, this is how the game works. It needs to be simple, it needs to be concise, and it needs to be something that is readily available to the audience. With how Twitch works now, you could just as easily have like a Nightbot type thing going, hey, want to know how it... want to understand what's going on? Watch this 2-minute video and it'll explain everything. Just pop up in chat every so often with a link to the video. Stuff like that makes for an extremely easier to stream to tabletop RPG. So, what is another aspect of something that makes an RPG a very streamable RPG? Visuals, to be blunt. Can you run the entirety of a TTRPG on stream without, entirely theater of the mind? Absolutely. And there's an entire market for that in podcasts and things like that. However, if you want the best chance of your tabletop RPG hitting it off, having something that the audience can watch is really, really useful. So any tabletop RPG that has map-based combat, if you can find a way to put the map on screen, that is really, really useful. Because what that means is that the audience now has another thing to help them understand what's going on, and they also have something to kind of fixate on. If you're doing something that's more theater of the mind, having artwork that the audience can see or something else, even just putting the player characters' character sheets up. We do something similar like that, similar to that for Tears of the Realms, where we actually have a program that Elias designed that allows the character sheets to just kind of pop up and rotate, so that the audience can kind of see what each character can and can't do. Something visual. Again, if you're streaming on Twitch, Twitch is a visual platform. If you're not using the visual aspects of it, then there's really no reason to be using Twitch. There are other things like, again, uploading it as a podcast is going to be significantly more simple, and you don't have to worry about running afoul of having to be there for it live or whenever it premieres. There's some downsides of podcast, including the fact that you can't actually get donations and subscriptions and stuff like that through podcasts specifically. I don't know of a podcast platform that offers like subscriptions and things like that, and there's less incentive to subscribe to something like that, whereas Twitch, you make money anytime that you're live. It's just how it works. Yeah, if you're looking for a streamable tabletop RPG, something that either uses maps or has some other aspect that can be visualized, can be very, very useful. The Dune Adventures in the Imperium TTRPG by Modifius has a really, really interesting mechanic for resolving anything. And it's actually a very visual thing. Basically, you will have some sort of token that represents what you're trying to do, and some sort of token that represents your character in some way. And then there will be different areas set up. Sometimes those areas refer to body parts, like this is your hand, this is your shoulder, things like that. In the case of like a duel, you might have things on different places. Sometimes it's an actual battle map. Sometimes it's just a kind of example of how the negotiation is going. But the resolution system in Dune Adventures in the Imperium is designed to be visual. It's designed to be tactile so that you can shift, this token over here, and that actually changes how things work. The 2D20 system that Modifius uses for most of their TTRPGs is not a remarkably complex system. So it is another one that tends to be very streamable. And it has, because of that resolution system being visual, it has ways for the audience to be able to follow even when there's nothing, quote unquote, to follow. There's no map or anything like that. You can still use that same resolution system, that very visual resolution system, and again, gives the audience something that they can kind of grab onto and see. If we go in a slightly different direction to Fabula Ultima, the clocks in Fabula Ultima are a very visual thing. It's one of the things that makes Fabula Ultima so much fun to play, is the clocks are something that everybody can see. And if you set it up correctly, the audience should be able to see it as well. When I run Fabula Ultima, every single map that I run, I have a little section on it for the clocks so that I can import that onto my overlay, and the audience can always see what clocks are going in real time. And it works really, really well. It's not the absolute best system in the world for dealing with clocks. I do have to jury rig a few things to make it work, but it does work. So I'm not saying that you can't run theater of the mind combat and a more theater of the mind style system as a very streamable tabletop RPG. However, if you are doing something like that, get something visual that the audience can follow. Track hit points. Have initiative show up on screen. Just something that gives the audience something to pay attention to. Because if they don't, it becomes very, very easy for the audience to effectively second monitor you and do something else, and then they're less invested in it, and very, very quickly they just start going, you know what? No, I'm done. So something of a visual makes for a very streamable RPG. The final thing that makes for a very streamable RPG, and this is something that tends to be a little bit more reliant on the GM, is it needs to have a world that people can learn about outside the RPG. Now, wait a minute. Critical Role, you couldn't learn about the world. You actually could rather quickly. The Critical Role wiki started showing up really, really fast. Like a few months after Critical Role started, we already had somebody that had started a wiki for it. And what that meant is that when people weren't actively watching, they could still learn about the world and learn about anything. Then we also had things like crit roll stats, that isn't a thing anymore, but used to be. All of these different places that people could find information when the game wasn't live. So there's a, I think the website's called World Anvil. Yeah. So there's a website called World Anvil, which effectively allows you to kind of build your own campaign and turn it into a wiki basically at the same time. I myself have never used World Anvil, but I've looked into it, and if I ever get to the point where, like, I can get control enough of my disabilities that I might be able to make money and maybe possibly someday get off of disability, I would probably create a World Anvil site for my custom campaign setting, so that anybody that watched could go over to the World Anvil site and kind of see what's going on. But having something like that, or creating your own wiki or something like that, is really, really essential for a streamable RPG. And that's one of the things that makes D&D so incredibly streamable, is because quite a few of the campaign settings have existed for so long that there's already multiple wikis for them. There are multiple Forgotten Realms wikis. There's an Eberron wiki. There's a Ravenloft wiki. There's a Greyhawk wiki. There's a Mystara wiki. There are so many different places that when people are excited about your show, they can go somewhere else and learn about it. In addition to the fact that there's so many different campaign setting books for all of these different things, that if people can't find a wiki or something for it, they can go out and buy a book. Now, does that mean that before you start streaming your tabletop RPG, you need to create a complete wiki for it? No, not in any way, shape, or form. However, it is something that you should have in mind as you're moving forward. And if you want a leg up, using a system that already has an established lore, things like running a license system. Dune Adventures in the Imperium, the Dune universe is full of lore and has tons of books and things like that. Same thing is true about this Stargate RPG, which is a ton of fun to play. I got to play it once and it was an absolute blast. Literally any of the kind of licensed RPGs, Star Trek Adventures, any of the Star Wars based RPGs, by using something that already has a world, it can be a huge leg up for you. It does mean that as the GM, you have to understand that world. But if you're passionate enough to create your own stories in a universe that already exists, you're probably passionate enough to already know the universe. And if you specifically pick a system because it already has established lore that everybody knows, and that's the only reason, and you don't actually know the system at all, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot. Because again, in order to be able to do this well, you have to be able to remain consistent with the world. And if you start making decisions that actually contradict stuff that people are going to look up when they start looking at it, it'll actually reduce your audience base as opposed to growing it. Yeah, those to me are the three big things that you need to have a quote-unquote streamable RPG. One, it needs to be relatively simple to understand to a random person stepping in. That can mean just choosing a TTRPG that is very simple and rules light. It can also mean choosing a very popular TTRPG so that people are already going to have a basis of it. Or it could be just educating your players every single time you use a mechanic in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's explaining it while it's on screen or having like an intro to tabletop RPG video that is starting to become more and more common and popular. The second one is it needs to be visual in some way. Battle maps and minis are the simplest and easiest way to create a visual for the audience to follow. But that's not the only way. You can put character sheets up there, you can track initiative, you can track hit points, something that the audience can watch that updates in some way, shape, or form so that they can actually see things and get invested. And then the third thing is you need to have a world that exists outside the game for people to get enamored with. That can mean going off and creating your own world and finding a way to make that world accessible to other people, like through World Anvil, creating your own wiki. It can mean using a pre-established world that is already popular. But there needs to be something that allows players to get invested in it. So yeah, interested to hear from you guys. Is there any aspects that you think I missed that makes for a good streamable tabletop RPG? Let me know in the comments down below. And do you disagree with anything where you go, no, actually this particular thing either is not important at all or is actually harmful to a streamable RPG? Again, let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, it's going to be all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.